The teacher organized a field trip but had no idea that one student had.
Hello everyone. Enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch.
Christian lowered his head as he stepped into the classroom like he always did. His worn-out sneakers clacked with every step. On his back, he carried an old backpack with a missing shoulder strap, heavy as if the whole world was resting on it. No one in the class paid attention to his arrival, as if the air had shifted for a moment and then vanished. Christian Walker, Ms. Mary Parker called his name during roll call, her voice flat as if it were just another label on the list. She didn't look up, her eyes still fixed on the attendance book. Present, Christian answered softly, so quietly that only he could hear it. He sat at the last desk, gently pulling down his sleeve to cover a tear in his coat. It was the only winter coat he had. His mother, Helen, a janitor at a nearby high school, had gotten it from a charity center. During recess, Christian went to the restroom. In the mirror, he saw his hair, now long and messy. He used his hand like a comb, trying to fix it to no avail. A voice called from behind. "Hey Christian, don't you have a comb at home?" Christian turned around. It was Matthew, a popular student known for his humor and sharp sarcasm. Matthew sneered, then walked off without waiting for a response. Christian looked after him, lips pressed together. He was used to it. That night, in the damp little room of their rundown apartment complex in Southside, Christian quietly packed his backpack for the next day's field trip. His mother, Helen, sat sewing a hole in one of his socks under the dim light of the desk lamp. "Did you remember to pack your thick jacket?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "Yes, Mom," Christian replied without turning around. Helen pulled a small plastic bag from the fridge, carefully wrapping 2 sandwiches with cold pork roll in a napkin. "Take this for lunch. I didn't have time to make anything fancy, I hope you don't mind." Christian forced a smile as he took the bag. "It's fine, Mom." The next morning, the school's yellow bus stopped at the gate. Students poured in, chattering like sparrows. Christian was the last to get on, carefully searching for an empty seat at the back. The spot next to Luke and Andrew was already taken occupied by their backpacks, so he kept walking and sat at the very back, by the window. While the other groups shared music through Bluetooth earbuds and unpacked snacks, soda, and homemade meals in shiny lunch boxes, Christian opened his sandwich bag. The smell of cold pork mixed with old napkin made his face flush. He glanced around, then folded it back up and tucked it into his backpack without eating. "Christian," a voice called out, startling him. It was Paul Carter, the captain of the soccer team and the most popular student in class. Paul wore an expensive windbreaker, had headphones around his neck, and flashed a bright smile at his friends. Pointing at Christian, Paul joked, "Looks like someone just got off a bus from the last century." Laughter broke out. Christian lowered his head. On the way to Pine Hollow Forest, the bus passed hills still dotted with patches of old snow. Ms. Mary picked up the microphone. "Everyone remember to keep the area clean, don't litter. When we get there, split into groups, set up camp, line up for your tents, and follow safety rules." "Christian," she glanced at her clipboard, "you're responsible for your own tent. No one partnered with you?" Christian shook his head slightly. Ms. Mary shrugged and moved on to the next group. No one asked him anything. Off the bus, groups cheered as they picked spots near the lake or beneath large pine trees. Christian walked further away, where the ground was uneven and covered in jagged rocks. He pulled out his tent and looked at the setup diagram. "Thread the cord through slot A, connect to stake C," he muttered, hands trembling. The wind whistled in his ears. A rope slipped from his hand, the stake snapped back and hit his wrist, startling him enough to drop the tarp. "Christian, need a hand?" a male voice called out. Christian turned quickly. Paul was standing there with his hands in his pockets, his expression a mix of mockery and friendliness. No. I got it," Christian stammered. Paul laughed. "Come on, come with us. Let's explore the woods a bit. You can pitch the tent later." Christian blinked. His heart pounded. For the first time, someone invited him to join a group. He nodded quickly. Okay, he said, tongue-tied. Paul called out, Luke, Carla, you hear? Christian's coming with us. Carla, a girl with dyed red hair and pink headphones, glanced at him and shrugged. Luke pretended to clear his throat and looked away. But no one objected. Christian followed them, his heart fluttering like 100 tiny birds in his chest. He walked as if afraid to wake from a dream. He looked up at the clear blue sky. Sunlight had never looked this beautiful. As they passed a small stream and mossy path, Christian tried to start a conversation. This place is beautiful. I've never been on a field trip before. Carla didn't answer. Luke took selfies with Paul, not even glancing back. Christian forced a smile and added, do you know where to find bird nests? I read in biology. Christian, Paul suddenly stopped and turned around, when did you start talking so much? Luke burst out laughing, and Carla, adjusting her hair in her phone camera, said, probably because he's walking with celebrities now. Christian froze. He gave a weak smile, but his lips trembled. Were they teasing, or being real? The group continued deeper into the forest, leaving Christian trailing behind. Each passing remark felt like a shallow cut never deep enough to bleed, but slicing at his already fragile pride. Christian gripped his backpack straps, swallowed hard, and told himself, it's fine, they're just joking. He was panting slightly when the group stopped at a sparse clearing. Pine branches intertwined, scattering light patches on the leaf-covered ground. Paul clapped his hands. Let's stop here. Good spot for some pictures. Luke pulled out his phone first. Lighting's perfect. Carla, stand next to Paul. Christian stood by a dead tree, wondering if he should ask to be in a photo too. His hand brushed the backpack strap, eyes timidly looking their way. Carla stood close to Paul, her lips curled in confidence. Paul looked back and saw Christian still lingering, then smiled, hey Christian, come over and get in the picture. His head snapped up, stunned, then he nodded repeatedly. Thanks. He approached, standing on the edge, not daring to get too close. Paul raised the phone, counting out loud, 1, 2, 3. Click. Perfect. Luke cheered. Posting this on Instagram. Christian smiled awkwardly, his eyes shining. He thought, we took a group photo. Mom will be so happy. After the photo, Paul waved his hand, let's keep going. There's a little path over there, leads to a nice shallow stream. Christian hurried to follow. He heard the rustle of leaves under his feet, blending with the group's laughter. Even if no one spoke to him directly, just walking with them made him feel warm inside. Luke pushed aside a branch for Carla. Christian walked last. He tried again to join in. Do you guys hang out a lot? I don't really go out much. Carla didn't respond, but Luke called back, really? Well, guess today's a rare exception. Yeah, Christian smiled awkwardly, unsure if it was meant kindly or not. Paul turned, stepped back a bit, and patted Christian's shoulder. Hey, just so you know, the rocks by the stream are slippery. Be careful. Christian blinked. You're warning me. Of course. Don't want you to faceplant, Paul chuckled. Carla raised an eyebrow and looked at Christian. Stop, Paul. He might take that seriously. Christian blushed, lowering his head. I know, I'll be careful. After about 10 minutes pushing through dense woods, the group reached a gentle slope leading down a narrow, misty trail by the stream. Moss covered the tree roots, and dew still clung to the leaves. Let's stop here, Paul said, raising a hand. What for? Carla asked. One more picture. Great angle valley view in the back. Let's get everyone in for a grand shot. Luke eagerly said, I'll frame the shot. Paul turned to Christian. You stand over there, close to the edge, so we all fit in. Christian looked where Paul pointed a slightly wet rock near the slope's edge. He hesitated. It's kind of slippery. It's fine, Paul grinned, you're just standing for a second. No one's pushing you. Carla chimed in, come on. I'm starving. Christian stepped up, the damp stone cold beneath his shoes. He tried to balance, arms slightly out. Luke raised the phone. Okay, smile everyone. Christian hadn't steadied himself when Paul suddenly shouted. Watch out, snake. Startled, Christian slipped. His foot gave way, and he tumbled down, crashing through a bush before disappearing over the edge. Ah! A dull thud followed. Carla gasped. Luke instinctively stepped back. A heavy silence hung in the air. Then Paul burst out laughing. Oh my God, what an idiot. Carla joined in, though her eyes looked uneasy. Paul, you scared him for real. Luke shrugged. He's fine. It's not even that steep. He'll climb back up. Paul bent to look down. Christian. Hey, you okay? No answer. Just the soft rustle of falling leaves. He's probably faking it, Paul waved it off. That attention-seeking thing. Same as always. Luke mumbled, yeah, we'll check later. Carla bit her lip, then turned to leave. Let's go back. I'm hungry. Paul shrugged and called out one more time, Christian. If you're okay, meet us back at camp later. No response. Christian lay at the bottom of the slope, his whole body aching, his mind spinning. A sharp pain throbbed in his right ankle, it wouldn't move. The left side of his face was streaked with blood from a rock cut. He opened his eyes to see the forest canopy above, branches overlapping while sunlight trickled weakly through the leaves and blurred over his face. Christian tried to call out. Paul. Luke, someone, help. Only the wind answered. Is anyone there? He whispered. A chill seeped into his skin. His jacket had been torn, exposing the thin t-shirt underneath. His hand grasped at a nearby root, but his strength wasn't enough. Christian looked up toward the slope. No one stood there anymore. They had all left. Did they really leave me behind? He thought, his eyes blurring with tears. Up above, Paul led the group back to camp. Luke chuckled. Gotta admit, his reaction when he fell was hilarious. Carla stayed silent. A flicker of concern flashed in her eyes, but she raised her phone and opened her messages. Paul checked his watch. As long as we're back by lunch, it's fine. If anyone asks, just say he probably wanted to wander off on his own. Luke laughed, Miss Mary doesn't even pay attention anyway. Back at camp, students were gathering for lunch. The scent of grilled sausages, sandwiches, and soda filled the air. Christian still hadn't returned. But no one asked. Christian lay still, eyes half open, struggling to stay conscious through the dizziness. The bushes he had fallen into had shredded his clothes. His right ankle was now swollen, and every twitch sent a sharp, piercing pain through his leg. The scent of damp earth and blood mixed in the air, making him nauseous. A small branch had jabbed into his side. Christian tried to sit up but only managed a few centimeters before collapsing again. He groaned softly. Someone, anyone. No one answered. Only the hum of insects and the wind in the trees. Christian crawled weakly toward a nearby rock, trembling hands clutching twisted roots. In his mind, Paul's shout echoed again, watch out, snake. That scream was intentional. A prank. A joke. He had seen clips online, people messing with friends, laughing together. But nobody really fell. Nobody really got hurt. He pushed again. Paul. Carla. Luke. His throat burned dry. Blood seeped from a cut near his temple and trickled down. Meanwhile, on the trail back to camp, Paul's group laughed as if nothing had happened. Luke grabbed a handful of dry leaves and tossed them in the air, his face when he slipped down that hill so funny. Carla didn't laugh. What if he actually got hurt? Paul frowned and looked up. Carla, are you worried? That slope's nothing. And Christian's not a little kid. But he didn't respond. What if something really happened? Paul exhaled and shrugged. If you're that worried, we can go check later. For now, we've got tents to set up. No one's checking, no worries. Luke added, Christian never talks to anyone. If he's quiet, who's even gonna notice? Carla said nothing, opening her camera and fixing her hair. Paul glanced at her and smirked, relax. Miss Mary doesn't even remember Christian's name. She's too busy watching the top students. Down the slope, Christian curled up in the shade. The sunlight had shifted, leaving behind a cold, shadowy space. He kept himself awake by whispering. I'll be okay. Just a sprain. I've felt worse. He remembered getting hit in the face with a soccer ball back in elementary school. His nose bled orange, and he cried alone under a tree. No one came. When he got home, his mom had asked, was school fun today, and he just smiled, it was. Now, he told himself the same thing. It's okay, it's okay. Christian wiped the blood from his face with a torn sleeve, breathing rapidly. Ants began to crawl over his shirt, some climbed into his collar. He panicked, swatting at them, but he was too weak. One bite stung sharply. He closed his eyes. A vision of his mother appeared, her hair tied back, janitor uniform dusty, carrying a plastic bag with a lunchbox. Christian, come eat, honey. He smiled. And blacked out. Christian opened his eyes again. The light had dimmed, afternoon fading into twilight. Everything around him looked hazy. The treetops swayed in the wind, whispering something in a language he would never understand. He tried to move, but his right ankle felt like it was being stabbed. Every movement drew a strangled groan. He called out, weaker this time, is anyone there? His voice rose and faded into the emptiness. No footsteps, no reply. Only the distant call of birds and the hum of evening insects. He lifted his hand to his face. The cut on his cheek had dried, crusted over, but still throbbed. He gasped for breath, sweat chilling his back. The wind crept through his ripped jacket, making him shiver. His throat was parched as if he hadn't had water in days. Inside the backpack he dropped when he fell was a small water bottle. But now it lay several meters away, tangled in a branch. Christian reached out, his fingers grazed the air. He let out a breath, followed by a dry, rasping cough. The sky turned fully dark. At the top of the slope, where the students had long gone, only faint footprints remained in the soil. Christian stared upward, hoping someone would return. But there was nothing. Just cold silence. In his head, Paul's voice echoed from earlier. Christian, come take a picture. Stand over there, right on the edge. Watch out, snake. Christian squeezed his eyes shut. A tear slipped out. His left cheek stung, reminding him it wasn't a dream. It was real. They left me behind, he murmured, so faint he could barely hear himself. At the camp, Miss Mary ran in search of him, her feet sinking into the forest floor. Her flashlight darted wildly, eyes scanning everywhere. Christian. Where are you? No answer. She pressed the walkie-talkie. John, I don't see him. We need more lights and people for support. Mr. John's voice came through, got it. I'm calling the other teachers. But it's getting dark, be careful, Mary. Mary gripped the flashlight tighter, her heart filled with guilt. I ignored him for too long. I never really noticed who he was. Christian was trembling. A slight fever had begun, likely from an infected wound exposed to the cold. His vision blurred, the world around him fading as if covered in a thin layer of mist. The distant voices could no longer reach him. Instead, old memories came flooding back, clearer than ever. He remembered 6th grade, when he was assigned to a biology model group with 3 other students, Ryan, Olivia, and Julia. Christian timidly said, "I can draw the diagram if you guys need." Ryan scoffed, "You don't even know how to draw. Don't ruin our project." Olivia's tone was gentler, but still dismissive, "Yeah, it's okay, we'll do it ourselves." Julia, the only one who said nothing, simply turned away. Christian nodded, retreating to a corner with a pen in hand, unsure of what to write. On the day of submission, the group got a high grade, but Christian's name was crossed off the list for not contributing. That night, he skipped dinner. His mother asked, "Why aren't you eating?" "I'm tired." "Did something happen at school?" "Nothing, Mom." Christian exhaled hard, covering his eyes with one hand as if trying to erase the memory. But another image surfaced. An 8th grade soccer game. He had asked to join Paul's team. "You?" Paul sneered. "Don't kill the vibe." "It's just for fun," Christian tried to smile. "Fun? Maybe for you. For us, it's a burden." Everyone laughed. Christian walked away and watched from a distance. He now lay motionless, though partially conscious. He thought of his mother. If she knew, she would have rushed here frantically, job be damned. His mother, Helen, had once been called to a parent-teacher meeting after Christian was attacked during recess. But instead of defending him, the teacher said, "Christian should learn to be more social. He's quiet and distant." His mother said nothing during the meeting. On the way home, she only said one thing, "You just need to try your best. I'll handle the rest." But some things she couldn't fix. Like loneliness. Like the pain of being forgotten. A strong wind stirred Christian awake. Night had fully fallen, moonlight dimly spilling across the ground. He shivered. "No. I don't want to die here." He began to crawl, dragging his body along the forest floor. Each movement sent sharp pain through his leg, but he didn't stop. Bit by bit, he whispered to himself. A twig snapped beneath him. Blood oozed from an open wound. He gasped for air. If just one person. Back at the hill, Natalie was still awake. She paced around the camp, uneasy. Carla sat near the fire, hugging her knees. "Carla," Natalie said, "are you sure Christian is okay?" Carla said nothing. Natalie moved closer, voice lowered, "I saw your face this afternoon. You were scared. Why didn't you say something?" Carla's voice trembled. "Paul said it was fine. What do you think?" Carla turned away. "I don't know." Christian collapsed. He was completely drained. The air was colder now. His shirt was soaked in sweat, his back covered in dirt and rotting leaves. A bug crawled across his hand. He didn't have the strength to brush it off. Maybe I shouldn't have been born. A terrifying thought passed through his mind. He shivered. I don't blame anyone. I'm just so tired. A tear rolled down. Not from pain, but from helplessness. Christian closed his eyes, letting the darkness swallow him whole. Miss Mary Parker's watch showed 6:47 p.m. The sun had fully set behind the mountains, leaving only a deep violet streak across the sky. The forest air had grown noticeably colder. She swept the flashlight across the dark trees, still calling. "Christian. Where are you? Answer me." The trees responded only with the rustle of dry leaves. Mary paused, placing a hand on her chest, her heart racing. Footsteps approached quickly from behind. "Mary," called Mr. John, the tall PE teacher, sweat dotting his face. "We searched by the stream, nothing." "What about the hill group?" "Still searching. The area's too big. We need rescue teams." Mary nodded, breathing heavily. "I can't believe, why didn't I pay attention to him sooner?" At the camp, most students had been told to return to their tents and stay silent. A small group sat around a dying fire. Carla hugged her knees, staring blankly. Paul sat nearby, holding a soda can, trying to act unfazed. "They'll find him," he said softly. "He couldn't have gone far." Carla replied flatly, "Did you see he was hurt?" Paul glanced over. "You're overthinking. Anyone could have scraped something on that slope." Luke added, "He slipped on his own. We didn't push him." Natalie, sitting nearby, suddenly spoke up, "But he hasn't come back. And none of you said anything until Miss Mary asked." Paul frowned, "You make it sound like we did it on purpose." "Not on purpose." Natalie stared straight at him. "You scared him about a snake, stood by the edge, and laughed when he fell." "Not on purpose." Luke jumped up, "Natalie, stop blaming people. Things are bad enough already, what more do you want?" Carla whispered, "We should have told the truth from the start." Paul turned to her, "Carla, don't tell me you're going to betray us." Carla stayed silent. Her hand clutched the corner of her jacket tightly. In a section of the forest about 300 meters from the camp, Christian lay curled beneath a large tree root. His fever made his head throb, his lips dry and cracked. He no longer moaned or cried, only faint breathing remained. A strong gust of wind blew leaves overhead. He opened his eyes briefly, and for the first time that day, he saw stars. At the camp, Mr. John gathered all the students, speaking firmly. "Listen up. This is an emergency. A student has been missing since this afternoon, and we need everyone to be honest. Who was the last person to see Christian?" A long silence followed, stretching like an eternity. Then Natalie stood up. "I saw him with Paul, Carla, and Luke earlier today." Mr. John nodded, turning to the three, "Is that true?" Luke looked down. Carla nodded shakily. Paul murmured, "We invited him along to take pictures. But then, we didn't see him again." "What exactly happened?" Mr. John asked coldly. Paul stammered, I just shouted to scare him, then he slipped, but no one pushed him." Carla blurted out, "He really fell. Rolled down the slope." I meant to say something." All eyes turned to them. Mr. John's voice dropped, "How long have you been hiding this?" No one answered. Miss Mary came running, pale as a sheet. "I called rescue. They're on their way." Mr. John turned to her, "We have to split up and retrace the path. Every minute counts." She nodded, eyes reddened. On a narrow forest trail, the local rescue team led by Stephen Harris advanced quickly with spotlights and radios. Stephen had over 20 years of experience searching mountain terrain near Asheville. "Start down the eastern slope," he instructed. "A report said the boy fell somewhere around here." Another member, Lucy Hartman, a young rescue worker, shone her flashlight on the ground. "I see slide marks and some dried blood." Stephen knelt down, "Exactly. He couldn't have gone far." At 8:12 p.m., the first rescue team reached the rocky slope area. Their lights scanned the bushes. Lucy called out, "Christian. If you can hear us, make a sound." Nothing. The forest was too dense. Stephen got down on his knees, checking roots and soil. "There are grip marks. He crawled this way." Lucy added, "We'll split up. I'll go left." Stephen nodded, "Stay in contact." At the camp, Miss Mary stood alone, staring into the dark. Natalie approached hesitantly. "Miss. I'm sorry, for not saying anything sooner. Miss Mary pressed her lips together, eyes wet. It's not your fault. It's the adults. It's my fault for not seeing him. In a patch of forest near where Christian lay, Lucy suddenly shouted. Stephen! Over here! Stephen rushed over. Beneath a large tree, Christian lay curled up, eyes closed, his face pale. In his hand, he still clutched a crumpled bag of bread. Lucy knelt down and placed her hand on his neck. He has a pulse. It's weak, but he's alive. Stephen grabbed the radio. We found the victim. Request ambulance access via the West Trail. Lucy whispered, Christian, can you hear me? You're safe now. A freezing gust swept through the Pine Hollow forest, making the woods feel more desolate and cold than ever. Darkness had fallen completely, like a thick, damp blanket blocking out the last traces of light. Voices echoed through the trail. Christian! Where are you? Christian! If you can hear us, say something. Miss Mary nearly shouted, her throat hoarse. The flashlight in her hand moved frantically, scanning every tree base, every bush. Mr. John was right behind her, holding the radio, speaking and panting. Rescue team found traces of blood. They're focusing efforts on the west side of the forest. We should have never let him go off alone, Mary said, nearly choking up. All my years as a teacher, I've never felt so blind. John didn't respond. They kept walking deeper into the darkness, where the dim light couldn't chase away the cold seeping into their bones. On the other side of the camp, Paul, Luke, and a few other students held flashlights. They were assigned to help search the outer perimeter near the vehicle path. Paul led the way, light pointing down at the ground, his steps sluggish. He sighed. God, it's freezing, and they still make us search even though rescue already found Christian. Luke replied, probably just for show. Mr. John's face was tense as a wire. A girl in the group, Eleanor, frowned. But we should search thoroughly. If it were you two missing, Christian would have definitely looked. Paul turned back and scoffed. You sure? He wouldn't even have the guts to leave the camp. Whatever, let's just pick a random bush and say we checked. Luke chuckled. 10 minutes walking around and then we're out. Eleanor shook her head and left them behind, turning down a small side trail. Meanwhile, Christian lay still in the arms of Lucy, the young rescue worker kneeling beside him, holding his head above the damp ground. Christian, can you hear me? Do you hear me? Her voice was soft as the wind, close to his ear. Christian opened his eyes slightly. His vision was blurred, but he could make out the flickering yellow light behind Lucy's back. A faint warmth began to spread in his frozen chest. Who are you? I'm Lucy. You're safe now. Someone's here with you, okay? Christian gave a small nod, his eyelids heavy. In his hand, he still clutched the crumpled bag of bread his mother had packed. Lucy saw it and pressed her lips together. I promise, your mom will know how hard you fought. At the same time, near the camp, Natalie stood silently by the fire. Carla approached hesitantly. Natalie. What? Carla lowered her head. You were right. We hid it, we knew he fell, but didn't say anything. Natalie stared at her for a long moment, then asked, were you afraid of Paul? Carla didn't answer. She pulled a tissue from her jacket and wiped her eyes quickly. I thought, it was just a joke. But Christian's face when he fell, it keeps replaying in my head. He didn't scream. He was just scared. Natalie clenched her hands, then spoke quietly, you can still make it right, Carla. Not for me, for Christian. On the hilltop, the ambulance had just arrived. Stephen, the rescue team leader, signaled quickly, move carefully. He's very weak. No jostling. 2 medics lifted Christian onto a stretcher, wrapping him tightly in a thermal blanket. He lay motionless, but his lips murmured something. Lucy leaned in. "What is it, Christian?" "My mom, will she come?" Lucy's throat tightened. "She will. She's coming." The red lights of the ambulance lit up the tree trunks like eerie flames. The forest briefly blazed in color as the vehicle began to leave. Back at the side trail, Eleanor returned to Paul's group. "Did you actually search properly?" she asked, eyes skeptical. Paul shrugged. "Big forest, weak flashlight. Not seeing anything is normal." Eleanor frowned. "I think we should tell Mr. John our group didn't check thoroughly." Luke snapped, "What, you want us to get dragged into a formal investigation?" "We're worried too, not just messing around." "Worried?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Then why have you been whining and trying to go back this whole time?" Paul interjected, "Enough. Christian's been found, right? Now it's up to the doctors. We're done." Eleanor didn't respond, but her gaze toward Paul had changed. Back at camp, Mr. John stood before the gathered students and made an announcement in a tired voice. "Christian has been found. He's alive, but very weak. He's been taken to the hospital." A collective sigh of relief swept through the group. Miss Mary stepped up beside him, her voice trembling. "Everyone. I'm sorry. I failed in my responsibility. I overlooked a student just because he wasn't outspoken, didn't raise his hand, didn't make noise." The atmosphere went still. Natalie raised her hand. "Miss. I think Christian never wanted to stand out. He just wanted to be seen." Mary nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks, "And I didn't see him. But starting today, I promise no one will be forgotten again." In the ambulance, Christian breathed slowly, eyes half closed. In his ears, the siren echoed like ocean waves. But this time, it wasn't a lonely sound. It was the sound bringing him back to life. In the damp night, Miss Mary collapsed to her knees at the edge of the slope, gripping the flashlight that trembled in the wind. Her face pale, her eyes wide as the light shone below, Christian lay motionless, wrapped in a thermal blanket, his pale face stark against the dark soil. Forest leaves scattered across his hair, as if nature itself were trying to shield the forgotten child. "Christian, oh God, Christian!" Mary whispered, then screamed, her voice cracking. She rushed down without waiting, her shoes slipping on moss, nearly falling. Lucy Hartman caught her. "Careful, ma'am. He's still very weak." Mary knelt beside Christian, her trembling hand touching his cheek. "Christian, can you hear me?" "It's me. Miss Mary." Christian's eyelids fluttered open. For a moment, he didn't recognize anyone. After a few seconds, his cracked lips moved, whispering. "You, really came." Mary burst into tears. Yes, it's me, it's real, you're safe now." Christian took a deep breath, tears spilling from his eyes. "I thought no one would come anymore." Lucy wiped the sweat from his forehead, speaking calmly, "We're here. It's going to be okay." Mary looked up at Lucy, voice choked. "I never noticed him. I never asked how he was, if he was happy. I just looked at grade books and easy-to-remember names." Lucy gently squeezed her shoulder. "It's never too late, if you start now." The ambulance had reached the forest edge. Christian was lifted onto the stretcher, eyes barely open. As the wheels rolled, the red spinning light reflected off Paul's face. He was standing on the outer edge of the student group just reunited after the search. The light wasn't flashing or bright. But in Paul's eyes, it felt like fire burning his skin. He turned away, but not fast enough to escape Natalie's gaze. She had been watching all along. At the camp, all students were told to return to their tents. But no one felt like laughing. There was no more Bluetooth music, no more laughter carried by the wind. Everything was quiet, as if the whole forest were holding its breath. Carla sat curled up, eyes vacant. Luke said nothing. Only Paul leaned against a wooden post, hands in his pockets, staring blankly toward the direction the red lights had vanished. Natalie approached him directly. "Did you see anything, Paul?" Paul turned, voice dry. "See what?" "See that you crossed a line. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't for fun. It was a life." Paul smirked. "I didn't push him. But you yelled, 'Snake.' It was just for the photo. I didn't think he'd really fall." Natalie clenched her jaw. "You never think about anything except yourself." Paul stayed silent. Natalie stepped back, eyes cold. "This isn't over." That night, in a small mountain hospital, Christian was under close observation. Doctors confirmed he suffered from hypothermia, a severe ankle sprain, some shallow cuts, and serious dehydration. Thankfully, no internal injuries or brain trauma. Lucy stood in the hallway, looking through the glass. Inside, Christian slept soundly, still holding the bag of bread his mother had packed. A doctor came out and spoke softly. "He's incredibly strong. No one expected a kid that frail to last so many hours in cold wilderness." Lucy smiled faintly. "Because, he's used to being left behind." The next morning, news spread throughout the school. Christian Walker, the boy often forgotten, had nearly died in the woods from an accident that his classmates had hidden. Every hallway buzzed with whispers. His name, once ignored, now echoed on everyone's lips. The principal called an emergency assembly. Miss Mary stepped onto the stage, eyes swollen but resolute. "I'll be direct. A student nearly lost his life due to the carelessness of both his peers and his teachers. I take responsibility. And I want you all to understand, every action, no matter how small, has consequences." Several students looked down. I asked Paul Carter, Luke Johnson, and Carla Bennett to stand. The three stood slowly. No one said a word. "Would you like to say something to the class?" Luke stammered, We didn't mean to." Carla spoke, her voice choked, "We just thought it was a joke." Paul stayed silent. Miss Mary looked directly at him. "Paul." Paul lifted his head. His eyes no longer carried their usual arrogance. "I yelled, 'Snake,' to scare Christian. I knew he was afraid. I saw him slip. I knew he fell, and I walked away." The whole class was dead silent. You could hear hearts beating. "I'm sorry," Paul said, his voice trembling for the first time. "No words are enough. But I truly am sorry." That afternoon, in a quiet hospital room, Christian woke up. His mother, Helen, was slumped beside his bed, her eyes sunken with worry. Her hand tightly gripped his. Christian softly called, "Mom." She looked up and burst into tears. "Christian. Oh God. I'm here. I'm right here, honey." He forced a faint smile. "I'm sorry for making you worry." She shook her head. "No, I should be the one apologizing. I wasn't there when you needed me." Out in the hallway, Lucy stood silently, watching through the window. She didn't want to interrupt that moment where a child finally felt warmth again after having his heart frozen over for so long. Christian opened his eyes again. This time, the light didn't come from a blurry moon or distant stars. It was the bright, clear, warm light streaming from the ceiling of the ambulance. It took him a few seconds to realize he was lying on a stretcher, wrapped in thick, warm blankets. The terrifying cold of the previous night now seemed like a faded gray dream, even though his heartbeat was still weak and his breathing unsteady. "Christian," a voice said beside him. He turned his head. It was Lucy Hartman, the brown-haired rescue worker with her hair tied up, her face a mixture of tension and relief. She was sitting close, his hand still held in hers. "Can you hear me?" Christian moved his lips. "Yes." Lucy leaned closer, gently brushing his damp hair back. You were so brave. We're on our way to the hospital. Everything's going to be okay. Christian turned his eyes toward the side window. The trees were sliding past, the headlights casting light on soaked trunks and trembling blades of grass. He whispered, were they looking for me? Lucy squeezed his hand. Yes. Someone was calling your name through the forest. Someone cried because they were worried about you. You weren't left behind. Christian turned his head, eyes misting. Miss Mary. That's right. She's waiting for you at the hospital. A single tear rolled down from Christian's temple onto the pillow. At Pine Hollow Town Hospital, the fluorescent lights cast a cold white hue. Mary Parker sat on a bench outside the emergency room, still clutching her phone like she was waiting for a call that would never come. Next to her sat Natalie, quiet and steady. Neither had spoken in nearly half an hour. The sound of running shoes echoed down the hallway, and Mary looked up. Lucy walked in, breathing heavily. He's okay. He's awake. Weak, dehydrated, mildly in shock, but the doctor said he's not in danger. Mary shot to her feet. Can I see him? Lucy nodded. Yes. But only for a few minutes, he needs rest. Mary stepped into the hospital room, her legs almost giving out. The soft light shone on the small face lying in bed. Christian turned his head, his eyes widening. You. Mary sat beside the bed and took his hand firmly. Christian. I'm so sorry. Christian said nothing. I overlooked you, not just on this trip, but the entire year. I remembered the names of the top students, the ones who raised their hands, but I never called on you, never asked if you were okay. He whispered, I got used to it. Mary's voice broke. No. You shouldn't have to get used to that. No student should feel invisible. Christian shifted slightly, pressing his lips together. When I was down there, I thought I was going to die. But then, I heard someone call my name. And in that moment, I knew, someone still remembered I exist. Mary began to cry. I'll remember. From now on. 3 days later, news of the incident spread across the school. No social media posts appeared. Students had been banned from recording during the trip, but the story spread like wildfire. Principal Teresa Morgan called a special assembly in the main hall. On stage, Paul sat to the left, dressed in full uniform, eyes fixed on the floor. Luke and Carla sat beside him, their faces tense. The whole school sat in heavy silence. Miss Mary stepped to the center of the stage, holding a microphone. Today we're not just here to apologize, but to understand the consequences of silence and indifference. She turned to Paul. Paul, is there anything you'd like to say? Paul swallowed. I yelled to scare Christian. I thought it was a joke. I didn't think he'd actually fall. Mary asked, and after that? Paul lowered his head. I didn't help. I turned away. I left him. Carla broke into tears. We saw it too, but I was scared. Scared of getting blamed. I was a coward. Luke didn't speak. He just nodded, lips tightly pressed. Mary looked around the hall. Has anyone here ever seen Christian walking alone? Eating alone? No one called on him during a discussion. No one invited him into a group. Hundreds of eyes dropped to the floor. Natalie stepped up to the stage. She didn't use a microphone, but spoke clearly. Christian never asked for anything. He didn't need to stand out. He just wanted someone to talk to. Her voice cracked. If even one of us had stopped for 5 seconds to look around, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Immediately after the assembly, the administration issued the following decisions. Paul Carter was suspended for 1 month, required to undergo psychological counseling and perform community service. Luke Johnson and Carla Bennett received special disciplinary warnings and were mandated to attend a social awareness education program. At the same time, the school launched a campaign called No One Left Behind. Each student would be paired with a weekly buddy to ensure no one was isolated. At Christian's house, his mother Helen sat by his bed, her tears not yet dried. She whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't know it had gotten that bad." Christian shook his head. "It's not your fault. But I believed too much in my son is strong. I didn't see the wounds inside." He looked at her, his voice soft. "Do you remember, back in 6th grade, when my group mocked my drawing, and I told you I didn't want to draw?" She paused, then nodded. "I remember. I just didn't want you to be disappointed." She hugged him tightly. "I'm proud of you for surviving. For not giving up. For still believing in light, even when the world turned away." That afternoon, Christian was discharged from the hospital. Just before stepping out the main door, he saw a group of students waiting outside. Natalie stepped forward, smiling. "We came to welcome you back." Christian hesitated. You're not embarrassed?" Natalie tilted her head. "No. And you don't have to be either. From now on, you're not walking alone." Paul stepped forward, his usual confidence gone. He held out an envelope, hands trembling. "I didn't have the courage to say it face to face, so I wrote it all down. You can tear it up if you want." Christian took it without a word. Paul added, "I'm going to volunteer at a senior care center for a few weeks. Not because I was punished, because I need to understand how badly I messed up." Christian looked at him for a long time, then nodded slightly. "Thank you." A week after being discharged, Christian returned to school. The green iron gate no longer felt so cold. As he crossed the courtyard, he noticed many eyes following him, but they weren't indifferent or scornful. Some were curious, others ashamed, some regretful, and a few truly warm. He wore a white button-up shirt his mother had carefully ironed. In his hands were a folder with absence forms, medical documents, and a presentation he had written during his hospital stay. Natalie was already waiting at the classroom door. "Hey," she smiled. "Need any help?" Christian shook his head slightly. "I'm good." "Okay. But if you do, I'm here." She walked in first, leaving the door ajar. Christian paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and stepped into a classroom that had never felt like it belonged to him. Inside, the students were already seated. Some looked at their books. Others stared out the window. But as Christian entered, every eye turned to him. Miss Mary stood at the podium, grade book in hand, but today, there was no quiz, no roll call. She simply nodded at Christian, then said, "Today we have a special presentation. Christian would like to say something to the class." No one spoke. Only the faint sounds of chairs shifting as Christian walked to the front, his hand gripping the paper tightly. He stood at the center, took a long breath, then began to speak, his voice slightly shaky, but clear. "I'm not good at public speaking. I'm not good at presentations. Or making an impression." Whispers faded to silence. "I don't blame anyone for what happened. I just want to talk about what it feels like, to be forgotten." Christian lowered his eyes briefly, then looked directly at Paul, who sat in the third row on the left. Paul didn't look away, but his gaze was no longer sharp, just quiet, like waiting for a verdict. "There were times I thought, if I disappeared, no one would notice. I ate alone, sat alone, worked alone. And life just went on. No one asked. No one looked." Christian paused to breathe. "Until the day I fell down that slope, and for the first time, I heard someone call my name. Not for roll call. Not to borrow notes. But because they were really worried." His voice cracked slightly. That feeling was like a small flame in a snowstorm. Just one person who notices, that's enough. The classroom was completely silent. No one dared to look down or pull out their phones anymore. I'm not standing here to assign blame. I just hope that from now on, no one in this class ever has to feel invisible again. He turned to look at Miss Mary. I'm done. She nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. Thank you, Christian. The applause that followed wasn't loud like when someone wins a city-level competition. It wasn't rowdy like after an easy class. It was steady, sincere, and spread slowly across the room. Christian looked around and saw Carla crying. Luke had his head down. Paul, silent, gave a small nod, a second apology, wordless. That day, the homeroom period was different. Miss Mary didn't teach. Instead, she divided the class into small groups and asked each student to write down 3 moments when they had felt terrible at school, whether caused by others or by themselves. Carla read first. I once laughed along to fit in, even though I knew it was hurting someone else. Luke went next. I stayed silent when I saw someone being excluded because I was afraid it would happen to me. Another student, Nathan, said, I've never spoken to Christian, even though we've sat in the same row for 3 years. The class fell silent. Miss Mary said softly, today, we all grew up a little. That afternoon, in the library hallway, Paul caught up with Christian as he was checking out a book. Christian. He turned around. Paul stood upright, gripping his backpack strap tightly. I read your letter and you haven't replied. But whether you forgive me or not, I need to say this face to face. Christian stayed quiet. I'll be working at the senior center for the next 3 weeks. I'll help people no one visits. Every day. Christian nodded. I heard. I know I was wrong. Not just for yelling that day, but for thinking someone like you wasn't worth caring about. And I'm ashamed of that. Christian replied softly, if you really understand, then live differently. Don't try to make it up to me. Just make sure the next person is never me. Paul pressed his lips together, then held out his hand. Christian looked at it for a second, then shook it lightly. 2 weeks later, at a school field event, Christian was invited for the first time to deliver the opening speech alongside the school's active student group. He wore a pale blue jacket, his hair freshly cut, holding the microphone, heart pounding. Hi, everyone. I'm Christian Walker. Maybe a lot of you still don't recognize my name, but I believe, after today, we'll begin to really see one another more. He smiled gently. I'm not here to tell a sad story. I'm here because I survived. And I believe every one of us can survive if someone reaches out. A round of applause echoed. In the crowd, his mother Helen stood among the parents, her eyes filled with tears, lips trembling, my son. Next to her, Lucy Hartman, now a special guest of the school, clapped non-stop. She had witnessed the journey from the edge of death, to the gentle light of renewal. In the teacher's lounge, Miss Mary sat watching a video recording of Christian's speech on her computer. She paused it at a frame where he was smiling. I should have seen that smile sooner, she whispered. Her colleague, Mr. James, stepped over and placed a hand on her shoulder. We can't change the past. But we can teach the whole school to look toward the future. As the afternoon sun set, Christian rode his bike alone over the small bridge leading to the forest's edge. He stopped at the row of old pines where not long ago, he thought his life might end. He walked up to the stone near the slope's edge. He looked down. The breeze brushed through his hair. But this time, he didn't feel fear. He felt grateful that he was still alive, and that someone had stepped toward him, instead of turning away. He let out a long breath, then turned back. In the distance, Natalie waved and called out, Christian. Come on, the group's waiting. He smiled. Yeah, coming. And he ran toward those who had seen him, called his name, and waited for him. Every person, no matter how quiet, deserves to be seen, heard, and valued. Sometimes, just a simple question, a kind glance, is enough to pull someone back from the edge. Indifference is not innocent, it can shatter a soul. Let kindness begin with you, in the smallest of actions. Don't wait until it's too late to realize, someone's presence is never a given, it's a gift that must be cherished.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.